absolutism was as popular as TikTok is with Caucasian teenagers nowadays, England didn't follow the meta. Instead, the monarch contended with Parliament to make government decisions. The Tudor family, in particular, worked with Parliament to achieve their goals, but at the end of Elizabeth I's reign, tension began to rise between the two parties. Elizabeth did something that every significant ruler seemingly forgets to do throughout history in naming a successor to the throne. She chose James VI of Scotland to be her heir. Now, James was the son of Mary Stuart, whom Elizabeth had ordered to be beheaded for treason. But the choice of James was not surprising, since he was Elizabeth's cousin and therefore her closest living relative. When James became king, he dropped the 5 from his name to become James I, because England never had a king by the name of James. From the beginning of his reign, James made everybody conform to the Anglican Church and harassed those who did not. James also had major financial problems because he'd spent government money, aka taxes, extravagantly and relied on personal favorites for monetary advice. James was forced to call in Parliament and ask for extra funds, but they questioned James's domestic and foreign policies every time they met. This infuriated James to the point that he would dismiss the House of Commons multiple times. However, James's hasty actions only united his opponents against him. Then James had a son by the name of Charles. Kind of funny how it goes like James. Charles I had the same views as his father and intensified the tension between the king and Parliament. He persecuted Puritans more severely, which caused him to leave and sail for America. Charles wanted to be an absolute ruler, but he lacked the army or the bureaucracy to do so. Parliament was uncooperative toward Charles and demanded that the king recognize their rights to free speech and freedom from arrest. Of course, Charles dismissed those requests and they went straight into the garbage. However, Charles had to call Parliament in need for funds. This enraged members of Parliament and subsequently made them threaten Charles that if he didn't sign the Petition of Right, they would not grant Charles his requested funds. Charles signed the document, but later attempted to raise money apart from Parliament in an attempt to govern England with their influence. Then, the Puritans who supported Parliament, who were called Roundheads because most of them had short hair, fought against the nobility and the Anglicans, who were referred to as Cavaliers.
Choose your character.
Okay, good. Oliver Cromwell was the leader of the Roundheads, and after many battles between the Roundheads and the English army led by Charles, Oliver Cromwell defeated the English military at the Battle of Naseby. The next 11 years, it was a time of experimentation and new forms of government in England. Cromwell was the leader of the army and had no program for governing the country, so consequently he ruled by trial and error. At first, he and the Rump, known as the Roundheads, jointly governed England, but problems soon arose. Cromwell found, just as Charles I had before him, that it was very difficult to rule with an independent-minded parliament. So, Cromwell then took the title of Lord Protector, and he established what is called the Protectorate. He ruled in accordance with the written constitution. Then, after Oliver Cromwell's death, his son Richard succeeded him as Lord Protector, but he did not have the same forceful and driven personality that his father had. Sensing the disruption of the people, Richard allowed the parliament that Charles I had called in 1640 to reconvene. Charles then took over as the monarch of England. This reestablishment of the Stuart monarchy is called the Restoration. Now, with the restoration of the English Parliament began to reinstate and bring back laws that had been previously enacted under James I and Charles I. One of the first acts they brought back was the Habeas Corpus Act in 1679. This act made it legal for the government to hold someone in jail. This act was deeply hated by many people because it could put people in jail with no trial and without any reason. Similarly to the American government system, the English parliament system, while growing in power under James II, developed two factions, and these factions were very competing, and they became the forerunners of Britain's first political parties. They were called the Whigs and Tories. The Whigs were those who were against James, and they were a name applied to Scottish robbers who killed their victims before plundering. Then there were the Tories. The Tories were the ones supporting James. It was a name applied to Irish rebels. And soon these opposing parties adopted these nicknames as their official title. By 1688, England began to have some political trials and difficulties in their government. This is when the bloodless or glorious revolution of 1688 happened. After this, the monarchy of England had been overthrown, and Parliament placed William and Mary to become joint rulers of England. Their reign marked the only time in English history that the country had co-rulers. However, before Parliament officially granted the throne to William and Mary, it drew up a set of conditions that had to be met. These conditions were embodied in a document called the Bill of Rights. This Bill of Rights was limited to royal power. Parliament continued to pass new laws under William and Mary. In 1701, Parliament passed the Act of Settlement, which had far-reaching consequences for the English crown. Because of this act, Parliament established its right to grant the throne to whomever it wanted.
After the reign of Mary's sister, Queen Anne, the throne passed to George of Hanover, a descendant of James. George I could not speak English and relied on others to carry out his responsibilities, developing the cabinet government.
This first began during the reign of Charles II, who often called his closet advisors to his office, which was called a cabinet.
During George I's reign, George had little interest in political matters and left the affairs of government to the chief minister, Robert Walpole, who many recognize as the first prime minister of England. Executive powers then gradually shifted from the king to the cabinet.